I first ran into Marc Morris at the first ever Evolve Strength Symposium that happened last fall. So he was one of the presenters. I'm going to give you some backstory on Marc. Marc has over 10 years of experience as an online nutrition coach, along with a PhD in human nutrition. So he's been lifting since a young age, and fitness has always been sort of like at the forefront for him. He's played a lot of sports, very academic. He went right into school out of high school, and we talk about that stuff. But then we talk about where shit has hit the fan, and we talk about things that have brought him joy and things that have made him sort of like shift a little bit and sort of reframe his priorities or just slow down because he described himself as stoic. He is kind of like one of those people where they have that poker face where you can't tell if anything's messing with them. He opened up about mental health and therapy, which is important. He talked about just general, like very simplified protein advice, which is helpful. When you get a guy like that with all this credibility, it's great to be able to bring their advice on protein to the forefront because then it helps my advice on protein to sound a bit smarter. So I hope that you enjoy this episode and please tag me. Tag me at Christian Little on Instagram or at The Lifestyle Chase. Tag Marc if you enjoyed this because it always feels nice when somebody listens to us chat. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to The Lifestyle Chase, Season 2. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. I'm your host, Chris Little. Let's get started. The Lifestyle Chase is brought to you by Yeg Fitness. Yeg Fitness is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's healthy lifestyle community, creating and supporting active living for all. Check them out online at yegfitness.ca and on social media at Yeg Fitness. So welcome to episode 94 of The Lifestyle Chase. I am joined by the one and only Marc Morris. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Well, thank you for joining me. I should ask, like, you do have your doctorate. Like, how do you go by? Like, what is your official title? What do people call you most often?
Usually just Mark for the
Yeah.
most part. Yeah. I think PhDs are interesting, right? I think if you're in a university setting and teaching quite a bit, like maybe you are referred to as like Dr. Morris, something like that. But I taught a few university courses, but haven't been involved with it in like the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm more or less just normal Mark who happens to have a PhD. Nothing.
Love it.
Yeah. Nothing else like that.
So, if I was to take a time machine back to your age 14, what was life like? What were you doing? What did you think you were going to be when you grow up?
Oh, I probably had tunnel vision around like high school sports. I think when I was 14, I have a late birthday. So I was always kind of like, I would say, I felt like a little, like slightly behind physically. My birthday's in November. So I would have went into high school at like 13 or something. So I would have been in grade 10 by the time I was 14. And I think at that point, I just started playing high school football. I think I finally took the plunge. Like I grew up playing hockey, but a close friend was playing football with the high school, and I decided, I needed like an earlier fall sport. So it was something that I was interested in and started doing it. And then I realized that, for me to get any better at this, I would have been. I'm 5'7", 185 most of the time, and at that point, I was probably like 5'5", 150 chubby fat type body composition. And I just realized, yeah, I have to like lift weights to get better at this. And that was probably my first introduction to, I guess you could say, like an individual sport, or like a pursuit that's more or less just on your own. Obviously there's like communities around fitness and health and lifting, but at that point it's like, I just played team sports, so we all cooperated, where that was like my first, opportunity to put some effort into something, gain some benefit, and go from there. So I think I was like pretty much tunnel vision around like academics and sports, high school sports.
Is that kind of what grooved you towards like your career path today?
Yeah, totally. And I think mostly because like I would say like moderately athletic, not tremendously athletic. I think my work ethic has always been what helped me um I guess participate. I wouldn't say succeed. I was always, able to keep up with everyone else because I would work hard at it. And I just felt like, yeah, I think it's a similar path to a lot of people. Like high school athletics kind of end, and then you continue on with something that you can be either competitive in or interested in. And for me, that was just being a gym rat, and that carried on all the way through university. My undergrad degree is in chemistry, which I think I like a little more background. Like I was like strong academically, didn't really know what to go into. I knew it was going to be some level of science, but I didn't know if that was going to be like engineering or um, another hard science like mathematics. Probably not mathematics, but something like that. And I think I applied to a few different schools in just like general science programs. And for whatever reason, I applied to, I think, Laurier, Western, and maybe University of Windsor, because that's pretty close to where I'm from. And uh, I decided on Laurier as the university I wanted to go to just because of the student experience and stuff. Uh, but applied for the general science program, and they actually put me in the chemistry program. They just like kind of like shuffled me into like they're like maybe they disbanded their general science program or something, so they put me in chemistry. And the first year was pretty general anyway, but then I just stuck with it. I liked the people I was like going to school with and stuff, and it seemed like the right approach. So I just kind of stuck with it. And at that point, I really had no idea what I was going to do still, but really liked lifting weights. So I probably was like in a lab, but also mostly paying attention to what was going on in the gym and just completely um, spending most of my time researching nutrition and health and that type of stuff. So it was kind of like an interesting scenario. And I think I tried to, at the time, Laurier had a good business program too. And I thought they had a dual degree of business and science, but they didn't have a dual degree of like almost like kinesiology and like biochemistry type stuff, which was probably really been my main focus. And so I just stuck with chemistry and then probably spent all of my time in the weight room.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Knowing what you know now, and knowing what you were like when you were 14, what would be the most simplest nutrition advice that you would give to your 14-year-old self?
My 14-year-old self. I remember some of the things I thought at that time. Um, were just so interesting. Like you just go through phases. I remember working in the summer going into grade 11 in a like a Greek food restaurant washing dishes, and they would send me home with like a gyro and fries every night. And I remember just like gaining 25 pounds that summer and getting quite a bit bigger. I'm just trying to the most simplest. So like the phases would be I was, you'd go between like, oh, I want to get leaner and then I want to like get huge kind of thing. So I think the simplest advice would be like just slowly gain body weight as you adjust and not go through these like drastic cycles of, of different focuses and stuff, right? I think I probably could have spent a lot more quality time just gaining muscle in a slow and controlled fashion. But when you're, 14 to 18 years old, that's not very appealing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, has there ever been a time where you felt like, oh, I just wish I could get more lean? Like, what's your approach towards that?
Oh, I think that like is it like constantly goes. I think I probably haven't escaped from that mindset of that that high school kid. I think I'm always looking to be like bigger and leaner. It's kind of the conundrum we're faced with in these circles, right? Like you
Yeah.
always want to be improved, but you also like I don't know. Most of us that are like doing this stuff naturally just don't have that uh, ability to gain muscle and get like quite a bit leaner at the same time. So I think it's one of those things that's constantly going through my head, but it's just slower phases of that stuff now. I think
Makes
it's just like
sense.
more yeah, I think like um probably every 2 years I spend, some like 12 weeks getting leaner, kind of resetting things and then going back to just the slow, steady climb up of a little bit more food and hard training. I mean, the training doesn't really change all that much most of the time, but it's just um slower phases of a different focus. But I think when you're younger, it's just kind of your attention um, just changes so quickly based on what you're hearing and listening to and in your social circle and what they're doing and half the time when you're in that scenario, someone like me, the person that you're listening to has like like at that age, no credentials. They're probably the most athletically gifted friend you have, and you're listening to them for that reason, and you just can't replicate what they have going on anyway because it's out of their control and yours. So
Yeah,
yeah, just being a little more realistic about everything.
it's a good way
Yeah.
to put it. I'm curious about like your coaches growing up because you would have been in all these different sports
Yeah.
and trying all these different things, but I feel that coaches can tend to influence you to either leave a thing or stay in the thing. What was your experience with that?
I think yeah, that's a interesting point. I think again, I was like I would be younger physically all the through the entire time, and I think at one point I remember a really tough decision for me was going back for a fifth year of high school and just playing high school football. That was like something that people did at that time. I think in Ontario we had something called OAC, and it was like a fifth year optional year of education that people would like go back for and maybe take a few more courses to strengthen their applications for university. And I was doing that purely just to play sports again. And that was like my focus. And I remember having to tell my football coach that like this made no sense for me at all to do. And I'm actually just going to go to university, and there being like a weight lifted off my shoulders. And I remember just thinking, I think everyone was like, yes, academically, you need to like leave this, and like just playing sports isn't going to serve you any good anyway. So I think a lot of times like my coaches are just kind of like a mindset of like, you've outgrown all of this already. Like, why would you be doing this? And that like, you need to move on and go on to bigger and better things type thing. So I think that like, kind of like almost, like a push in the right direction to do other things and be bigger and better. And maybe at the time where I'm thinking like, oh, I want to play university football or something, and that probably wasn't in my interest anyway. And they knew that, and it's like, you got to fly now kind of thing. So I think they pushed me to like um more of a career than what my adolescent mind would have wanted me to do.
I like it. That's a good answer. So, in jumping into the academics, did you just do it right away? Did you have like one of those vacation years? What was your trajectory?
No, I literally went straight through from like I didn't take any time off, and like pros and cons to everything, but I think it benefited me. My PhD took me longer than it probably should have, but it took me like 5.5 years instead of 4. But I transferred from the master's program into the PhD program, so it was a bit extended anyway. But yeah, I went from undergrad, getting there at like 17 and going through for the 4 years straight, and then moving to Saskatchewan in 2009, and then graduating in, I guess it would be 2015 or something. So I went all the way through. And yeah, it was kind of like slowly chipping away at stuff. I knew when I was transferring into my PhD, I asked one of my advisors, who I like respected and trusted. I asked her, I was like, this is going to sound like selfish, but like, I don't want to go into this to be an academic. Like that would be a nice thing to do, but I would like to do this type of stuff so that I have like, um, high level credentials in fitness circles, and maybe that'll help me like, like publish books and type stuff. And she was supportive of that. She said like that's not a bad reason to do something. And I almost kind of felt like it was like I was getting away with something, or like not the right reasons, like something that was selfish. And she's like, no, that makes total sense to me. So I always kind of knew that was my focus and what the long-term plan was. So with that in mind, I was able to just keep chipping away at it and finish it.
That's an interesting point. It kind of brings up like so many fitness professionals kind of get into this corral of like thinking that they should have what other people have, or thinking that other people care what we want to do. Like a lot of personal trainers thrive in being themselves versus trying to be like that other personal trainer that they look up to. Um, what
Yeah,
what
yeah,
is
I think,
your sorry, we're
well,
cutting each other off, but like what is your stance or your experience in that, in because you've done all this schooling, you've had other people that you've competed against, you've had other people offer different business platforms from all over the world. What's been your like core values that have kept you on your path?
Well, that's a good point. I'm not sure I'm gonna when I say core values, I think this will be. I remember like so speaking to that point directly about like comparing yourself to others and kind of almost like keeping up with the Joneses in terms of like certifications and different things that you're doing. I remember so I was taking my chemistry degree and I remember going to a lecture or like it was kind of like a weekend seminar or something like that in 2006. Like this is before a lot of this stuff became popular. And John Berardi was speaking at it, and that was like the reason why I wanted to go to it because I was like, I read all of his stuff on T Nation. I was like super interested in like how do I take this stuff seriously? Like, could this be a career for me? And I remember him speaking, like educational knowledge based talk. And at the end, during the question and answer period, some mom that was in the crowd was like, my son is starting to take this stuff more seriously. Like, how do they become on a career path? Like, how do they do something like you're doing? And like typical answer, he was like, I'm really not sure. Like I don't know how to get here. Like take your education seriously and work really hard. That type of answer, right? Like real non-specific, pretty general stuff. And I remember at that point thinking like that was my question. Like how do I do that? I don't know. I didn't gather really much from your answer, but I see the letters at the end of your name, and I'm going to try to replicate that identically. And even if I work real hard and do it, then I'll probably become close to it, I guess. And that's literally what I did. And I think that was my tunnel vision around all that stuff. I saw like PhD CSCS and it was like, I need to do this entirely the same way. And I don't know, I guess like through, I don't know, maybe it was sheer luck or just being stubborn, like it happened. Um, and I think I benefited a lot from it, but there's a lot of things that I do in my day-to-day business and coaching that I don't need any of that stuff for, like at all. Like I think literally a lot of times, like I think my experience has helped me become a better coach, but I don't know if those like academic pursuits necessarily did. Maybe some like critical thinking and stuff and communication and written, you know, being able to communicate effectively and stuff has benefited from that. But at the end of the day, like I don't think it was those credentials, but we get so so much tunnel vision around those specific things. Like I need to do exactly like that. And maybe, putting yourself through those challenges and growing is what like actually you benefit from as opposed to the actual credentials. Right. So I think I'm the exact example of what you're talking about. So when you're saying like, yeah, what are your core values around that? I'm like, I'm not, I would need to reflect a little bit on that because I'm not really sure. I know that like obviously like working hard is important and setting goals for yourself and trying to accomplish something is important. Maybe what you're accomplishing isn't, the end goal or the outcome isn't what's important, but just what you learn along the way and where that takes you is important. So that's kind
So
of like my,
in like a week, you have all these things that happen. You have your career stuff, you have your family stuff, you have your own stuff. Like we have to take time for ourselves. What are the things for you that have to occur every week for you to be living your best life?
that's an evolving process. So like things have really changed for us. My wife and I welcomed a little boy. And yeah, Max, he's like 10 months old now. So last March, Max came into this world. So things have like really changed for us quite a bit. Uh, I think a lot of times, like I have this vision for myself right now of being like obviously family is really important. So I'm trying to juggle both roles as like a father and contribute. And my wife Amy has tons of good quality stuff going on in her life too. So she's on mat leave, but she keeps up with a lot of stuff. She's a cancer survivor, so that within the last I guess 2.5 years now. So things have been pretty crazy in the last 3 years in our lives. So she's really active in the cancer community. So trying to juggle that stuff and make sure she has time to spend time within her career and giving back and that type of stuff. So making sure that all moves and also training, I think is probably the one thing that I need to do to um, make sure I just mentally stay healthy. And I know that allows me to like, release some pressure and tension and just stay involved in the stuff that I love. And I think like it a lot of times it ends up being like a whole whack of busyness. So within that, just having the foresight to like, what do I need to do to keep my business growing? What do I need to do to keep my family healthy and happy, and like trying to focus on those things and just like manageable things that I can kind of tick off that will keep everything moving in the right direction. Because a lot of times we just get so, stuck in the lists and the like the to do things, and you end up working within your business as opposed to on your business, and that's probably been the biggest thing that I need to focus on to keep things moving. So I know that's kind of, I don't know, does that answer your question of what
Yep,
like needs
yep.
to happen? Yeah,
So
yeah.
with your business, what have been like some pillar moments for you? Like you've probably had a lot of times when you've had big wins, maybe you've had big losses. See if you can outline a few.
I think anytime anytime I get too stuck into, I mean, there's like most of the stuff I do is online coaching. Like the core structure of my business is online nutrition coaching. So I get really involved in client correspondence and stuff. And if I find that like I'm doing too much on the client fulfillment side of things, I don't have an opportunity to share and educate and put myself out there, which kind of makes the growth aspect tough. So it's like balancing those two sides of things, where like if you don't focus on working with your clients and delivering a quality product either, then you're not going to get any referrals. But it's trying to like balance those type of things. So really, I'm very practical in what I do and my business, and I like to be able to like, okay, well, what do I actually need to do this week, so I don't just get stuck punching the clock and working for the sake of working. So I need to like take a step back and really look at things. So being able to craft that over time has been really, really important, because I'll just put my head down and work. Like I'll work for like 10 hours straight, and my wife will ask me like, what did you do today? And I won't even know. Right. Like a part of me, like, I just thought like that's the way to accomplish things. That's the way to do things. So being able to like take a step back and think of like, what do I need to accomplish, and what is the person I see myself being this week, and how does that fit into the long term, and then trying to deliver on that allows things to keep growing, because you can get so caught up in that. So that's probably one of the biggest like pillar moments, is like actually having a plan and doing your best to stick with it, in the effort to become the person you want to become, or business person, or anything like that. So that is probably one of the pillar moments. And when I'm not focusing on that, like everything just goes haywire, right? And
Yeah.
not so much like, not acutely, right? Like the world doesn't fall apart, but it like it lends to those regressions that like you don't see coming, right?
So
Yeah.
have you
So
ever experienced a regression that you didn't see coming?
yeah, well, not so much I didn't see coming. Like when Amy was diagnosed with cancer in 2016, like I had a really hard time like putting myself out there, just because I was so like emotionally burnt out, right? So that was like a lull in things, but it kind of just, I feel like similarly, like people talk about like the stress response being the same things. Anytime I'm stressed in the same sense and not delivering on the things that I need to keep things growing, similar things happen. So it obviously wasn't to the same extent, but yeah, like sometimes, yeah, I'll have those regressions when I'm not focusing on like, I don't know, taking care of yourself is so cliche, but I mean like taking care of like what you need to do to keep things growing, right? Is the biggest thing. So
What is your way for like just stopping and like getting you what you need in those times of like emotional burnout?
um well, it's a good, I don't know. That's a tough one, because like now that I'm like thinking about it, a lot of times like I do thrive really well under pressure. So it's just learning how to apply that when it's like important, and knowing that like I remember a lot of times, even when I was working through my PhD, like sometimes you do things just for the sake of doing them, and you're like sitting down, and that 10-hour day could be like a 5-hour day if you just manage your time a bit more effectively. So it's learning to know when to back away and say like, I can accomplish this like tomorrow, and giving yourself a bit of time just to like say like, this isn't a step backwards, this is something that you need to do to be more effective when you are actually working. Because I think we've all had those periods where it's like, I'm doing this for the sake of thinking that it's the right thing. And I think we've all have examples of like different coworkers or bosses that you see do that as well, right? It's like, you don't need to be doing this right now. Like you could be doing something else that'll allow you to be more effective. Like you're just lying to yourself, really. So it's just being able to like step away when you need to step away, knowing that like it's actually going to help you in the long run. It's like making the hard decisions to set yourself up for success, and knowing that like I don't know, it's so much easier to do when you have a plan for that, right? So kind of having an idea of like what your, day slash week slash long-term stuff looks like so that like you can effectively plan that stuff in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you meet your wife? Like what's the story there?
That's a good question. So we met, so we would have like in at the U of S, the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition is like they're both schools are under the same umbrella. So we would have had mutual friends and we just like I don't know, caught each other's attention and met up and kind of went from there. And then we ended up kind of like not working together, but kind of operating in some of the same circles and stuff and going from there. And it's just like everything just clicked right away and it's been really good. And then I was like super into powerlifting at the time. And she wanted to get involved with it. She was doing like a lot of running and she wanted to get more into like lifting weights and stuff. And I was super hesitant at first, but she's like totally dove into that area. So she ended up like winning nationals, setting like a national squat record and stuff. So that like she kind of like shared that area of my life with me. So things just like continued to grow from there. And yeah, now we've been together for yeah, it's almost well, we've been married for 3.5 years and obviously been through like crazy life experiences, hoping things like, are normal for a bit.
Yeah.
But that's yeah. Yeah. So that's more or less the like the story there.
What was it like for you the day that you discovered that she was diagnosed with cancer? Like that would be pretty tough, hey?
Yeah, it was crazy. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I'm a bit stoic like with things, like emotionally like blunted at times. Like I have such a I don't know if it's like a defense mechanism or what it is. Like maybe like I've convinced myself, like being like a pudgy kid growing up, you gotta convince yourself things are okay all the time. So like I think my natural reaction is like, oh, this is okay. Well, like this is like, we'll make it through this. This is gonna be okay. When really it's just like completely shit, right? It's like the worst thing ever. And instead of just sitting in that awfulness for a bit, I probably like remove myself from it type of thing. Or I remember at times like I didn't miss a single one of her like chemotherapy sessions, but I also was like I'd bring my laptop in and work. So I was like there, but also just kind of like throwing myself into other things to kind of like cope and stuff. But yeah, the day that it happened, I think it just slowly got worse and worse. So she had a tumor the size of like a football. It was 2 kilos big. It was ovarian cancer and it grew like so rapidly. So we would have got married in September and she was diagnosed in the like I think her surgery was at the end of November. It was the beginning of November that she was diagnosed. So like within like 8 weeks, we were like, she was in a fitted wedding dress. And within 8 weeks, this thing was like, she's like super distended and there's like a huge, large mass. Right. So like everything happened so quickly. But at the time, we just thought like, um, maybe there's some sort of issue with like, we had just went on our honeymoon. So she was like, distended and stuff, right? Like a normal, like you are bloated from eating like pizza and drinking wine every day for, an extended period of time. Like they seem normal. So like we went in, we thought it was something else. And then, before you know it, there's a CT scan. And at that time we are thinking like, oh, this is just like a normal, like cyst type thing. This stuff happens. Then before you know it, like the C word comes out and it's like, this is all escalated in like 10 days. Right. So I was just crazy. It was like it was nuts that like this was actually happening. So completely surreal, but also I remember like as an individual, like I think her reaction was more visceral, and she is like a oncology background, so she kind of like saw this stuff unfolding and probably expected the worst because she knew better. Whereas I'm like an optimist, like super stoic. I don't know how to describe myself, but I was just like kind of like, no, this is not what it is. It's something else, you know, like it's all going to be okay. It'll be dealt with, blah, blah. And then it finally happened. I remember just like, I sound so stupid when I'm saying it, but I was like in the final appointment, like I was working like 10 minutes before on my laptop just to keep things like moving. Right. I don't know. Like, I guess I was like a support person being there and stuff, but like also like just trying to keep up with things, which is a blessing and a curse, right? You have like this flexible life where you can do stuff from wherever. So sometimes when we're like at an appointment or something, I think we had been waiting for a couple hours. So at that point, I was like, I'm just going to do a little bit of work kind of stuff. Then we went into the appointment and that happened. And I was like, oh man, this is like, I just couldn't believe it. It was crazy. So yeah, it was completely surreal and obviously just devastating. But at the time, I was just think I didn't know what to think.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
like nobody is prepared to know what to think. Like most of, well, 100% of the time, if something like that like comes into a person's life, they're not like, I've been expecting this. I've been anticipating some cancer
yeah,
diagnosis. So,
yeah,
and for you to be stoic in that situation isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe that's exactly what she needed. Like if you were like, oh my
yeah,
God, like what can I do? Like that would
yeah,
maybe like up her
yeah.
nerves and stuff.
Totally, totally. Yeah. Well, I guess so. Like up until I was probably, I don't know. I would say I've always been. I wouldn't say like I've been like a risk taker. Everything's been like pretty much like slow. Like made some good decisions to put yourself in a good spot and like growing and like maybe coming out here to do my PhD and stuff was like a bit of a deviation from like the safe path and stuff. And then maybe saying like, oh, I don't want to go into research, but I want to do private practice stuff and online coaching was like a bit of a risk because you're not it's not like a steady paycheck or anything like that. But up until I was like 28, my life was like super straightforward and not like difficult. I would say like it was like pretty par for the course, work hard, things are good. And then like, yeah, so like 2016, it was my dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And then we bought a house and then we got married and then Amy was diagnosed and stuff. So like, it was like a crazy, like I don't even know how to like I've explained it to like three therapists, like like explaining that story, like 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 when you every time I say it, I'm like, holy, like that, like everything that like bad could have happened in like an 8 month window, right? And just like the baggage that comes with that kind of stuff, and then just being like as you're saying, like a bit level headed and stoic, like being that person, um like unpacking that kind of stuff takes a toll on someone. So like all that stuff, and I think like throwing myself into work is just like an escape for me personally, but allows me to like I don't know keep a sense of normalcy through all those times. So I don't know. That's kind of like when I say like I thrive on pressure. Like I actually did well in some of those situations. Maybe it was just being able to focus on that stuff, but I know that's like allowed me to probably be a more effective coach because I see like always someone's always dealing with something, right? And it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm just gonna like not focus on myself and I'm going to just focus on something else and this needs to stop because I need to focus on what's going on in my life and the issues and stuff. And it's like a lot of sometimes like that makes sense, but a lot of times you can hear it in someone's voice where it's like, no, you actually need something else to focus on that's going to help like as a coping strategy, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like, well, like that doesn't mean I expect you to be like perfect through this all, but I do expect that like we can use this to help you get to the other side, right? So I don't know.
No, you nailed it. And it's like it's important that we talk about all this stuff because like I've had people that were on my podcast that have had similar things happen and people look at these people who are in this place of success or they've had all these accomplishments and they're like, "Oh, they had it easy. They haven't been through what I've had to be through." And
Yeah.
if we don't have these conversations, we lose out on that opportunity to make other people resilient. Like to have all that stuff happen in like the course of like a year. Holy shit. Like I would have
Yeah,
never
exactly.
guessed.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, and I think probably, I mean, everyone copes with things differently, but I'm not like I'm very, very public in one sense, but very private in another, which is the complete opposite of Amy. Like, if you can like check out her social media stuff, she she's on like national news when it happened because she actually live streamed some of her chemotherapy sessions. And like I was the moderator during it, and her friend came in and talked to her about it because she was an oncology pharmacist that this happened to, and she had a conversation around at Christmas with a nephew about like what to expect, and he just was like, "Well, like when do you start radiation?" And she was kind of like, "Well, actually, like my cancer is different. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to have like chemotherapy, and it's like a completely different thing." And I think like she was able to like take that and say like, "I'm going to show people what this is actually like," as opposed to like us having our own assumptions around it or not really knowing. So like that part is really helpful. So like I think a lot of times the people that are private with things, like we have no idea what they're going through. And like it's important for like sometimes it's helpful to like be able to show that stuff because you connect with other people, you know that you're not alone. But other times we got to get better at talking about it because like to me that's like ending stigma around stuff. It's like a brave decision, not just to talk about things for the sake of talking about them, but just opening up and connecting, right?
Yeah. And you talked about therapists a bit there. Like, were you being like truthful? Like some people, actually, probably half of my personal trainer guests go and they see a therapist, and I like to put that out on the table because I think a lot of people are reluctant or they don't know how to navigate that doing that. So what's
Yeah.
your experience with that?
Yeah, no, I've seen a few different ones. I remember the first therapist I saw was like he was a like someone with like 35 years of experience. Like within I would have saw him. I don't know when I probably only saw him for like 6 months, but he's on his way out of retirement. So I'm always interested in someone's like craft, right? So like I see things from two sides. Like I'm here to benefit obviously from talking to someone about what's going on with me, but like I'm also just like really interested in people that are good at their jobs. So like I'm like kind of like I was like excited to go talk to him as like things progressed and we got to know each other kind of thing. But yeah, I remember him like just like we like sat down and he like just cut into like the problem, right? Like no like beating around the bush. I remember him like just like saying like I remember telling my 5 minute story about like how crazy things were. And then him just getting to the first question and just like completely broke me down kind of thing. So yeah, I remember I just know like I was like probably my wife supported me and like saying like, yeah, you need to go like talk to someone. Like it's important to do that. And I think finally like making time to do that too was something that just needed to happen. And I just, I think I just like searched someone out and found like a good fit, right? I think that a lot of times like we're a little hesitant to like think, what is this person going to think of me? Like, will they even get what's going on? I think like a lot of just like or fitness professionals have like their bios on their websites. Like you can check out like what someone's about, right, and see what their philosophy is and what their life experiences is, and pick someone that like you think you'd be best suited for. So like I've done that a few times, and then he retired, and then I started seeing someone else. So yeah, like I don't like therapy is just one of those things where something that's important to make time for, and I think it's like just really cathartic because someone that like does tend to like keep things in, it just allows you to that gives you an opportunity to speak what's going on, and in a way that like a lot of your friendships and like close relationships, like ideally there's no judgment, but sometimes it's tough to be say exactly what you need to say, and even
Yeah.
in those therapy scenarios it's like it's tough to say all that stuff, but maybe it's good practice for other scenarios, right? Where like you learn to be more, in tune with your emotions and stuff.
Well, I mean, like, well, I'm a very in tune with my emotions type of person. Like, if you look back at like a lot of my posts or my episodes on the podcast, like I just put it right all out there, and I just find it so much easier to communicate with people and for people to understand where I'm coming from. Do you find a similar experience for yourself as a coach or as just like someone who's guiding people down their path? Like having seen a therapist, has that improved you or has it just been the same, par for the course?
Um, I think no, so like conversely, like I'm not in tune with my own emotions. Like I feel like I'm quite good at picking up on like what other people are feeling and dealing with that. But like I'm always kind of like that, like almost like that superhero complex. Like I don't feel that stuff. It doesn't apply to me, yada yada. When it clearly does, like it 100% does, right? So like I think I'm like the opposite end of the spectrum where it's like I'm not going to talk about myself. Like I'm going to talk about what's going on with you, and we're going to deal with that, and that's what's important. So I think clients just they appreciate when you have stuff that you can relate to each other with, right? So when it's like when someone's saying, you know, like my mom's really sick right now, like I'm having a hard time coping with this stuff. It's like I know exactly what you're feeling like, right? And then like opening up in that sense, like, yeah, like I know like, you know, you're having this never-ending battle between wanting to be like leaner but also wanting to be muscular, right? Like I can relate to that type of stuff, or just like the bar is never set high enough, and I know you're really tough on yourself, right? Like just being able to open up in that sense is good, and just knowing that like people want to hear that stuff, right? It's not all about them. Like they want to be able to like connect with you, right? And that just helps you build rapport and trust, and a bigger connection, which is like really what coaching is all about. It's
Yeah.
really not what you're doing. It's how you like make other people feel, and it's tough for them to experience emotions at that level if you're not opening up, right?
Has it made you a better listener? Because you talk about how you don't talk so much, but there's a good chance that you probably receive more of what they have to offer.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely has made me a better listener, and just
So,
picking up on things that you like you need that you should be hearing, right?
totally. With your journey into parenthood, like was that expected? Was that like a big surprise? What was the situation there?
No, that was probably like the one thing that was planned in all of this. So yeah, this is definitely something that like I always knew um I wanted to be a parent. It was something that like I definitely wanted to. I had no idea what to expect, and even still I have no idea what to expect. Like Amy is a rock star. Like she's definitely like much like she's maternal, she knows what to do, that type of stuff, and like I have no idea, right? And it's still kind of like evolving and stuff, and with the intent of like I want to be a really good involved father. So like that part is like kind of tough, right? And I think that's probably something that like a lot of new fathers go through, right? It's like you want to be involved but you don't really know how. And I was like, it's funny how like birth order and stuff, and like even just where you are, and like I was really close. My mom's side of the family is super close, so we spent a lot of time together, and I was one of the youngest cousins, right? So like in terms of like experience with younger kids, like I don't have tons of it, right? So whereas like if you're an older sibling or older cousin, like you just see a lot more of that stuff, so like you're familiar with it, right? Like you just are, you know what to do with a baby and stuff. So like that part has been tough, but it's just like kind of, it's just rekindled like a different, like a love for like learning and experiencing and just being more present, right? Which is probably the most beneficial part of it all, right? You get to experience like things again that you never thought would be like exciting, and they are. So that part is just like, it just brings so much joy to your life.
What's been the most exciting thing that you've experienced that you didn't expect to be exciting?
Um, he's like, Max is like, he's just so cute. He's like literally like, and I'm like talking empirically, like this kid is cute. So like, I don't know, everything that he like does is like, you just like eat it up. But I'm talking objectively. This child is cute. Maybe I don't know if you've seen any pictures of him. Like he's just a cute kid. But yeah, like I think just like getting to relive those like moments again, and like you like take them to the zoo with like animals and stuff, and they like get to like see them, and their like faces light up and your face lights up because it's like exciting. Whereas like if you don't have that stuff, it's just like another thing to do, right? So kind of like it brings a bit more of like childhood wonder to your life, which is, you probably a lot of times didn't think you wanted or needed, and like it just does that, and it's like really exciting.
Do you find that that's pulled you back from that work ethic that you have? Like you talked about how you have stoic, you have work ethic, you kind of bury yourself into the grind of like those 10-hour days. Like what's changed
Yeah.
there since being a dad?
I think I wouldn't say I wouldn't don't work as much, but I'm definitely more um like there's no time to mess around. So it's just much more regimented. There's a better schedule, which is probably lended to like last year was like my best year of um like financially and success wise. So like it was just one of the things where like you have no choice but to, and there's like it's a greater purpose, right? It's not just all about yourself, which is important. It's like finding a way to like, which I think we like a lot of times when we can kind of reframe it as that, like, maybe it's like more about like what we're delivering to our clients, or it's like something that's bigger than ourselves. Like you're trying to create a community or something like that. It makes it much easier to do. And when there's like a greater purpose around, um, why you're doing a certain thing, it just allows you to be much more effective. So the total amount of work has probably come down a little bit, but the effectiveness and stuff has I've just, you got to get that greater sense of why you're doing something and your reason for why. And it just allows you to like, you know, not mess around.
Yeah, well, I think you sort of touched on a point that was cool because it has a transferability to a lot of people that would listen to this, and I'll kind of explain what I'm saying here. Um, so when you have something that's like greater than yourself, so you are a new dad, you have something that's greater than yourself. For me, I'm just gonna call the podcast my baby. My
Yeah.
podcast is greater than myself. It opens up the door for me to get like such a deeper connection with people around me and like people from all kinds of different backgrounds, and helps me grow. And it takes away from the time where I might be able to like put my nose in a book and learn more about nutrition or fitness or anything like that. However, it almost makes me more effective in that realm. Like I almost like am in a position where that smaller period of time that I'm reading a book, I'll probably get more from the book because I know who I am, what I want, and I know what I'm looking for in that book. Would you tend to agree?
Yeah. No, well, I think you're just like, you're the actions around the stuff that you're interested in are, it's just like so much more like applicable. You're seeing examples of it and stuff. So like during this, like, exactly what to like ask me that's going to like, probe a different, life experience or get me to talk about something that like, not so much as like pigeonholed or anything, but it's just like so applicable to like the mission around the podcast. Right. And you're kind of always searching those things out because you have this purpose around, you want people to learn about this specific thing, right? Like this, like self-realization and like like goal setting and becoming the best version of yourself, right? So it just allows you to kind of like think in that mindset all the time, and then you just become really good at like asking people questions around that stuff. So you kind of like you're constantly thinking about that stuff, and that part is good. So anytime we put ourselves like in those scenarios and like you got like 100 episodes, right? Like you clearly thought about this stuff a lot, right? And it's allowing you to like act within that, which is the most important thing, right? It's
Yeah.
one thing to read a book, but when you like you can ask questions, get someone else's experience, reflect on your own, like you're just getting tons of real world examples of it.
Well, I think it's just important for people to realize like they got to find their thing that is greater than themselves, whether it be something that brings them joy in life. Like, well, essentially something that brings them joy in life. What's life without something that brings you joy? Like,
Yep.
what's the point in like crushing your continuing education or going to university or like doing your big business and scaling it up if you don't have something in it that brings you joy? Because like we only get one life, and like if we waste
Right.
it, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Like what are the things that fill your cup?
Yeah. Well, I think even just like, I don't know, like speaking to that a little bit too, I think everyone gets so wrapped up into like what they're passionate about too, and like trying to find that, and or like it's trying to fit a mold of someone else. Like for example, like like to each their own. Like if someone wants to be like a really good like parent and that's their main focus and that's what they want to do, like all the power to them, right? Like they don't need to be super passionate about a sport or something, right? Or even their career. Like maybe their career is something that they do just to like punch the clock that allows them or affords them other experiences in their life because they get to like you're going to work this job so that you get to spend more time doing your hobby, right? It's like just being aware of like what that is and what you want to be doing, right? Like I think a lot of times um we just get this idea that like, oh, I need to do what I'm passionate about or I need to turn it into a career or any of those things. It's like that's not the same for everyone, right? And I think like the closer you can come to realizing what's important to you is the better off you'll be, right? And
Absolutely.
it looks dramatically different from other people, right? And a lot of times it's just like it's finding that thing, and then like it doesn't bother me when someone doesn't know it, but when they're like complaining about how miserable their lives are and they're not spending time trying to figure out what that thing is, then go for it. But ignorance can be bliss too, and as long as like you're content with the way things are, or even if you're miserable and content with the way things are, at least like you have like some intent, like, or some awareness around that. And I think that's the biggest piece is like, what are you trying to accomplish? Maybe you're not trying to accomplish anything at all, and that's fine too. But as long as you know what that is. So it's just kind of like, yeah, carving out what that ideal life looks like for you, and then trying to strive towards, you know, making it work.
So, something that comes up a lot for me as a personal trainer is just like the topic of protein. And I've just found that if I ask somebody about if they're eating protein and then I kind of ask, well, how much protein? Like, are you eating a couple eggs or what? They're like, oh, yeah. And then they outline it, and I'm kind of computing it in my head, and it sounds like they're having like 50 grams of protein per day. What would your reaction be? What would your approach be? What's your advice generally?
That's a really good question. So I probably being able to study like a lot of like different like dietetic approaches, like the main thing I do with clients is just like an assessment, right? Like I'm not going to give anyone um recommendations without knowing like what they do in their day-to-day lives, because it doesn't allow me to like find the middle ground of like where they need to go, right? Like we have an idea of what our optimal range is for most people with protein intake for someone that's participating in resistance training or trying to improve their body composition, right? The lower end for most people is like 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, to like upper end of like any more than three probably isn't necessary in the majority of cases, right? So we have that optimal range, but what if we don't know what's going on normally, like just setting someone at um, grams per kilogram or like a pound, or 1 gram per pound of body weight, like might be such a huge stretch, right? So being able to study in dietetics allows me to like do some like assessment type techniques to say like what are you actually at, how does that compare to theoretical values, and kind of go from there. And by doing this with probably like 1,000 people over the last 8 years, yeah, like protein is definitely, if it's not underreported, it's also underconsumed, and always one of the like the things that are on the lower end of the optimal ranges, for the most part. So a lot of times, like the typical North American diet just doesn't have a lot of protein at like the first meal for sure, right? Like a lot of like quick convenient foods are mostly like are just easily are carbohydrates. So nothing against carbohydrates. It's just that you don't eat a lot of protein at breakfast most of the time if you have a busy life that you can't prioritize that. So like increasing it at breakfast is something that's important, but also just knowing like what your day looks like for the rest of the day and having some sort of parameter to shoot for is something that I find that is important as well. So like setting a total protein target for the day is something that is good, but not just setting it based on the optimal range, setting it based on like what you typically do and then building on that, right? So you have that person where you're adding it up in your head and it's 50 grams. Like if you're going to start them at 155, like way to make them feel like they're failing right off the hop, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we shoot for like 110 this week. Let's outline some ways that you can um, increase what you're already doing, and shoot for something that's reasonable, and build on that. There's a very good chance that you'll feel higher levels of satiety, and things will start moving in the right direction. You'll probably like recover faster from our sessions, that type of stuff, and then it'll just build on that. So that's the biggest thing with protein. But you're completely right. So like of the macronutrients, it's going to be the one that's the most important for body composition goals, which is for the most part why people are coming to see you, in most cases.
Yeah.
And so like just focusing on that will allow you to like really open up some doors.
Well, I like how you put it out there because like it's we're on the same page, so I feel fairly safe in just how important protein is for satiety and stuff. But I read up on some articles about just like how it's so much more than that. Like it contributes to mental health, it contributes to like immune system. Is Can you speak to any of that?
Well, I think a lot of times, so it makes sense that we're thinking about protein intake from like a muscle like protein synthesis standpoint, right? Like it's obviously involved in that, but yeah, it's not just involved in muscle protein synthesis. It allows you to develop, like your immune system is going to be active in that. So a lot of times when we study this stuff in an evidence-based sense, when we're thinking of just the outcome being like what happens in our skeletal muscles, we overlook everything else that's going on in our guts, in our immune system, and that type of stuff, which is also tougher to measure, especially if the focus isn't on that, right? Because we're thinking a lot of times like the focus is in like some sort of exercise science, kinesiology background. That's the outcome. So that's what we're looking on. But yeah, it's involved in so much other stuff. So that's where like a lot of the claims around like you only need 30 grams per sitting originated from, because the outcome they were looking at just focused on muscle protein synthesis and not the role that it has in everything else. So yeah, it's not just what's going on in our muscles, it's like what's happening in our total body. the
Perfect.
flip the flip side of this though is that once someone becomes indoctrinated in protein being important, you can see the opposite happen as well. So sometimes when I do an assessment on someone, generally what we're just talking about is probably the general population, people looking to get in shape and just put a greater emphasis on their health. The other scenario I see a lot of times is someone that has been in, a gym setting for a large period of time. They're thinking about this stuff and now it's like protein, 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 right? Where they start to focus on that and they don't eat any dietary carbohydrate at all. So their like fiber intake is low. Like they're no longer consuming like fruit and vegetables as often as they should be. And their protein is so high and their carbohydrate intake is low, right? Because they've just been so indoctrinated around protein being so important. So the flip side is like sometimes that you overlook other important macronutrients or foods that'll contribute to their health for the sake of just consuming protein. So I see that a lot of times that happen. And then usually when they come to me, they're thinking like, I'm having a really hard time like getting leaner and performing in my activity. Like what's going on? And I take a look at it and it's like, well, you are now like, you're basically like almost in like ketosis. And for the majority of people, that isn't necessary either. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, now let's put the protein, like maybe let's decrease that a little bit, increase your carbs, and you're now like within, more optimal range and you have better energy and everything else falls in line. Right. So that's the flip side of that. But it typically is much more, I see it much more often in someone that's been kind of within that circle for a longer period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to get that segment in there since I have you here and like I have a lot of my clients listen to these segments. I'm like, look,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put experts in front of you. I'm gonna get them to say their stance on protein and then
Yeah.
hopefully it matches mine and then you have that much more confidence in the choices that you're making in the gym to make this sustainable so you can do this into your 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I,
oh, go ahead.
Well, I think the best thing you can do is just track for a period of time and see what is typical for you. It's not something that you need to do forever, but just get a sense of like what is actually happening. And a lot of times, yeah, protein is on the lower end of things, and the one of the easiest things you can do is just increase your serving size of like what you typically would eat and start there, and then try to incorporate a few new um, servings of different proteins. Right?
Yeah, like I'll usually tell a person to, like do a little bit of a journal because you don't know unless you know. And then
Exactly.
they are enlightened as to what they are consuming. And then when they are more aware of what's in the food that they eat, then they're more empowered to sort of control like the portions of each thing. But I want to rein us back into the whole lifestyle chase brand. In the last week, what's the thing that has made you the happiest, brought you the most joy in the last 7 days?
Um, I think I'm very fortunate to know that like, like I'm in control of a lot of these things. So, especially like with my business and my family. So like that definitely gives me joy knowing that like I can put effort and steer the ship in a different way and that's all at my fingertips. I'm very motivated by that. Um, but yeah, just being able to spend time with my family has definitely been something that's like really, really important to me. And I'm enjoying, but I think that's like it's twofold. I think having that lifestyle and being able to know that like you can carve that time out for yourself, and while still being able to excel at other things, is definitely something that like definitely speaks to me, and I feel very fortunate about that.
Love it. So I have a question that I ask all of my guests, and then I put it all together. Sometimes I toss some Coldplay in the background, make it sound special. So here is the question. If you could give one piece of advice to someone on how to live their life to the fullest in the most true to themselves way, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, you got to figure out what you want is the biggest thing, and I think I spoke to that a lot throughout this conversation. It's just spend some time figuring out what that is, and it might not be something that like immediately comes to mind, and you might have to do some soul searching and living before you get to that point, but just being on a journey of trying to figure out what you want, and maybe by the end of that it might be completely different than what you thought, but that awareness piece and just being in tune with that will allow you to probably live your best life. Just that awareness piece.
I love it. That's
Yeah,
perfect.
I think we just get so wrapped up into like just living, without actually living, right? Like you just checking boxes, doing stuff day to day. And that like that's fine for a period, right? Like as long as there's like phases of it, like you can't be bang on all the time, but I know that like a lot of times you're doing that because maybe you're trying to like escape the big questions or the big things or the things that you truly want because you're like and you're just afraid of executing or acting on them, right? So that has its place too, but just having that awareness piece of like why you're doing certain things would save most people a lot of trouble in their lives.
That's an awesome answer. So I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciated the chat.
Thank you for listening. And as I always say, maybe too much, maybe not enough. Your ratings and your comments on iTunes, positive comments, I'm still never going to forgive whoever it was that gave me the 1 out of 5 on iTunes. Like, do you even listen to the Lifestyle Chase? Like, what are you rating 1 out of 5? I need some help to bury that a bit more. It happened like right at the beginning, probably like 5 episodes in. Somebody just got on there and just rated it 1, and I don't know what was going through their head. So if that pisses you off too, and I know I've brought it up before, but like I have to play that card because I need all the help that I can get. Being that this is a podcast that is free of advertising, the only shout out is to make sure that I don't go in the hole for being a podcast host because being a podcast host costs money. We have to pay a hosting fee. Aside from that, I don't generate any revenue. So that's why I promote myself to try and get you to promote me. And so those tags and those shares and social media and the ratings on any podcast platform that you use go a long way because it enables me to be able to reach out to these very busy guests with where time is not just like an abundance, like where they have to actually block out time for this stuff. They actually have to stop and like forfeit an opportunity to be with their family or forfeit an opportunity to be coaching somebody to pay their bills. Like they are blocking out time to be on this show and to share their story with you. So if you can help me elevate the lifestyle chase, then I can help you by bringing on more guests of all kinds of different backgrounds and expertise, and just to help make us all a bit more bulletproof. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.